Today we're recapping a 2006 film titled Children of Men, but before we dive in, remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. The story takes place in 2027 and opens with a news report about the British government. The regime has enacted a bill to keep the borders closed for 8 years and continues deporting illegal immigrants. The broadcast also covers the tragic death of the world's youngest person inside a coffee shop. As people listen closely to the news, Theo, a tall man, remains indifferent and leaves after grabbing his coffee. Moments later, an explosion occurs in a nearby establishment, injuring several people. Theo heads to work, where his colleagues are mourning the death of the youngest person. Noticing this, Theo lies to his boss, saying he needs to take his work home as he's more affected by the news than expected. His boss sympathetically agrees, and Theo boards a train home. On the way, illegal immigrants throw rocks at the train. Theo calmly exits the train and passes by holding cells filled with detained immigrants. He meets an old friend, and after sharing a hug, they head to the old man's remote house in the woods. Inside, Theo meets the old man's mentally ill wife, obsessed with newspaper clippings about human infertility and mass refugee immigration. There's also a photograph of Theo with a woman and a baby. Later, the old man boasts about his drugs and offers Theo a sample before shifting the conversation to the Human Project, a rumored organization trying to solve infertility. Theo dismisses the idea, arguing that even if they had a cure, it's too late since war and global depression are pushing humanity toward extinction. The next day, Theo passes more detention cells filled with refugees. 2 men suddenly force him into a van and take him to an interrogation room. They introduce themselves as the Fishes, a militant immigrant rights group led by Theo's ex-wife. The leader talks to Theo about immigrants and the British citizens who've joined their movement. She reveals she needs Theo's help to secure transit papers for a young refugee to reach the coast, suggesting Theo can get the documents from his cousin, a government official, in exchange for money. Theo refuses, so the men cover his head with a bag, hand him a letter, and release him. Theo meets his cousin, a government minister who runs a state-sponsored art collection. Knowing he won't get the transit papers if he's truthful, Theo lies and deceives his cousin. Later, Theo meets with a Fish's henchman at a bar and tells him his cousin provided the papers, meaning Theo must escort the young refugee. Theo agrees to do it for more money, and the henchman gives Theo a photo of the refugee. The next day, Theo meets the Fish's leader, who takes him to a car where he finds the henchman, the young refugee, and a midwife. They head toward Canterbury, but an armed gang ambushes them. The henchman quickly reverses, trying to escape, but the gang opens fire, hitting the Fish's leader in the neck. As they flee, they encounter police and ambulances. When police stop them and see the bleeding leader, the henchman kills them. In the woods, the midwife prays over the leader's body, while Theo walks away, overcome with grief. He breaks down in tears, mourning his ex-wife's death. Shortly after, the henchman calls for everyone to head to the Fishes' safe house on a rural farm. After freshening up, Theo overhears the Fishes electing the henchman as their new leader. Later, the midwife calls Theo to the barn because the young refugee wants to speak with him. She reveals that she knows about Theo's child with the Fishes' deceased leader, and tells him that the leader had instructed her to go with Theo if anything happened, as he would help her reach the Tomorrow, a mysterious ship that would save her. Theo is unaware of the boat but tries to leave. Suddenly, the young refugee strips off her clothes, revealing that she's pregnant. Theo is stunned. After nearly 2 decades of infertility, he stands before a pregnant young refugee. Later, the Fishes watch a news broadcast about the armed encounter involving their former leader, stating that the new leader, Theo, the young refugee, and the midwife, are now labeled terrorists for killing 2 police officers. The new leader warns everyone that the police could arrest them at any moment and suggests that their plan to hand the young refugee over to the Human Project might change, especially since she's pregnant. Theo suggests she announce her pregnancy publicly, sparking mixed reactions. Many believe the government will never accept a baby from a young black refugee, even though it's the first pregnancy in 2 decades. The young refugee wants to reach the coast and escape the government, but the new leader insists she stay and give birth in the safe house for her safety. She agrees to go to the coast after giving birth, which is met with cheers from the Fishes. That night, Theo hears arguing outside and learns that the new leader planned his ex-wife's death and intends to kill him next, using the baby as a political tool. Theo quickly wakes the young refugee and the midwife, informing them of the plan. They steal a car and try to escape, with the fishes in pursuit. The new leader orders his men not to shoot since the pregnant refugee is inside. Despite their efforts to follow Theo, the refugee and the midwife manage to escape to the old man's house. Theo introduces them to the old man, and they discuss the Tomorrow, which is revealed to be a hospital ship disguised as a fishing boat that will take them to the human project. The ship is set to stop at 2 locations at sunset: Winsmore that night, and Bile, a refugee camp, in 2 days. After hearing this, the old man leaves to make a plan. While waiting, the young refugee shares how she discovered her pregnancy. The old man returns with good news. He's found a corrupt immigration officer who can help them get into Beaks Hill. That night, after walking the dog outside, Theo overhears the old man talking about Theo's past with his ex-wife, recounting their romance and the baby they lost during the 2008 flu pandemic. Theo leaves while the old man continues his story. The next morning, loud noises wake Theo. The old man checks the CCTV and sees the fishes breaking in. Theo quickly escapes with the young refugee and the midwife, while the old man stays behind to stall the fishes before they leave. He expresses his feelings to his wife and performs a mercy killing. The fishes soon enter the old man's property searching for Theo. The old man lies to the new leader, but his men find documents revealing their plan to go to bail. Theo drives to meet the immigration officer, escaping before the fishes catch up. The next day, Theo wakes at an abandoned school and finds the young refugee on the swing outside, while the midwife is inside. The midwife talks about the increase in human infertility due to unexplained miscarriages. Suddenly, they hear an alarm outside. They step out to see a military vehicle, and the person inside orders them to stay put. Theo yells that the officer is a fascist pig, a phrase the old man told him to use. The officer steps out, lifts his baton as if to threaten Theo, then laughs and invites them into his car to drive them to Beaks Hill. On the way, the young refugee experiences severe pain in her belly, but Theo and the midwife cover it up to avoid detection. At Beaks Hill, the officer tells them a gypsy woman will meet them inside to help them get accommodation. Theo, the refugee, and the midwife enter the camp. Inside the bus, the midwife tells Theo that only the fish's former leader had contact with the human project, meaning no other members have spoken to them since her death. As they arrive at Beaks Hill, the young refugee's water breaks, and her cries attract a police officer. To divert him, the midwife pretends to have a religious outburst, but this leads to her being taken away. The young refugee witnesses the police's harsh treatment of illegal immigrants. They meet the gypsy woman who leads them to their room. The young refugee struggles through labor but eventually gives birth to a baby girl. The next morning, loud knocking wakes them up, and Theo opens the door to find the immigration officer and the gypsy woman. The officer informs them that the fishes bombed a hole in the camp to free refugees. Meanwhile, the young refugee tries to hide her baby, but the officer discovers the child. He warns them to leave, but the gypsy woman argues against it, prompting the officer to silence her with his gun. He reveals that Theo and the young refugee have bounties on their heads and attempts to capture them. The gypsy woman pushes him down the stairs with Theo's help, and they kill the officer and escape. The gypsy woman guides them to a hidden rowboat amid chaos. However, the fishes capture the young refugee and her baby. The new leader takes them into an apartment building, leaving Theo and the gypsy woman behind. As the fishes prepare to kill them, the British army arrives and engages in a firefight. Theo slips away and follows the young refugee into the building, passing corpses and hiding refugees. He finds the young refugee and the baby and tries to escape with them, but the new leader confronts them. An explosion kills the new leader, allowing Theo to escort them out. Everyone they pass, including soldiers and fishes, is momentarily struck by the sight of the baby, ceasing the fighting. They flee, and the gypsy woman leads them to the boat. She stays behind as Theo rows them to the rendezvous point, where they witness British fighter jets bombing Beaks Hill. The young refugee fears she is bleeding when she notices blood on the boat, but Theo reveals he was wounded earlier by the new leader. As they continue, Theo teaches the young refugee how to burp her baby. She then tells him she'll name her child after his deceased son. Theo smiles before losing consciousness. The film ends with Theo dying as the Tomorrow ship approaches their boat.